This is Sonic Shred for Season 9. This build is faster than ever, and we're clearing over Pit 100. Out of all the Druid builds, this is the fastest speed farmer, and it's not difficult to play. You can use it through all Torment 4 content, and it's just a really fun build to play. So I'm going to walk you through all the details of how to get it off the ground. But before we get into that, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and come by my Twitch at twitch.tv/screamhard. I'll be playing on this build for the next couple days so you can see it in action. Now let me break it down for you. So first things first, let's talk about the skills. So the main source of damage is the Shred, and it dashes towards enemies, and you can see that it's insanely fast. But Shred by itself is not going to be doing a ton of damage unless you buff it properly first. So what we're doing is we're using Grizzly Rage. Now most of the power from Grizzly Rage is just going to come from being in the form itself and having the right aspects on the build. But there is one small step before you go into your ultimate that you're going to want to do. All you got to do is alternate between Maul and Shred just enough times to get the 6 stacks here on the quick shift. Super quick and easy. So just make sure you do that before you ult. Now, before I actually hit the ult, look at Cyclone Armor. This one's going to give you damage reduction against non-physical damage, but you won't actually see this when we ult. So I'm going to go ahead and do that now. And you can see it's gone. It's still giving you the damage reduction, but you're not going to be actively using the skill. So when you're in your ultimate, really all you're doing is you're going to recast your ultimate before it runs off. And you can see when it's running off by this little green bar here. And you're just going to be attacking with Shred and using Bloodhowl. Bloodhowl is going to buff our damage by 25%. And it also activates our defensive passives, which is damage reduction and more offensive damage. And you can see if you don't recast it that there's now a timer on our Grizzly Rage. So it's very important to cast it before it runs off because the full cooldown starts after it runs off. So I'm going to go back into my Grizzly Rage. And one other thing is your Claw is an option to give you more spirit if you need it, but realistically you won't need it. As you can see, I can basically just sit here and attack and I'll never have an issue, even though I'm using runes that are draining my spirit constantly. Of course, this might be as the build comes online, so if you need more spirit early, feel free to add that into your build in other ways. And I'll talk about some of the ways you can do that as I go. Now, the best in slot setup is going to be the one I have on, but I'll mention some alternatives as well as I go through. So Air of Perdition is your Biss helmet, and it's impossible to beat this because you're getting a bunch of ranks to core skills, a bunch of critical strike chance, some lucky hit chance, and a 60% damage multiplier. There's no other helmet that competes with this for Shred. Some early game options might be a legendary helm, and on the legendary helm you can run Agile Wolf, which I actually don't use in the build, but it applies to Shred and it'll give you a little bit more damage. Or you could use something like Tempest Roar, which would allow you to use your storm abilities while you're in your ultimate, and then you could run Hurricane as additional damage reduction and use Cyclone Armor to pull enemies into a tight ball, making it easier to DPS. For the chest armor, I'm recommending Shroud of False Death. This is definitely the Biss here, but you do have the option of going Mad Wolf's Glee in the early game. And if you use Mad Wolf's Glee, you can use a different keystone passive that applies to that item specifically. But ideally, you want to have Shroud. And the reason Shroud's good is because you're getting an extra 1 point to every passive in your skill tree, which ends up being a lot of damage. And to be honest, since Shred has a lot less multipliers in the passive tree compared to some other builds, running Mad Wolf's Glee and the other keystone passive is actually not that bad compared to some other builds. For your gloves, you're going with the Blurred Beast aspect, and that's what's giving you so many hits when you're using your Shred. Our attack speed's not actually this fast, it just looks really fast because of the Blurred Beast. I'll go ahead and pull it off so you can see. Quite a difference. For our pants, this is the item I tested the most in the build because I was between 3 different options. Agile Wolf on Legendary Pants, which gives you the 4th hit and increases damage by 60%. Tybalt's Will, which gives you a 20% damage multiplier, a bunch of all stats, and a bunch of damage reduction. Or Legendary Pants, using the aspect that makes your Debilitating Roar into a werewolf skill. The Debilitating Roar one was nice, but it was a little bit more tedious and unreliable. And the Agile Wolf one made your attacks feel a little bit clunkier and didn't give quite as much damage as I was getting from a consistent Tybalt's Will. So Tybalt's Will ended up being the best in slot, but those other ones are good options as well. For the boots, I'm going with Direwolf's Aspect. Direwolf's Aspect is a requirement for the build, so make sure you have this on. You could wear it in your pants and use a different pair of boots if you wanted to, but this is the best spot to put it. For the weapon, we're using Waxing Gibbous. This weapon got buffed quite a bit because they changed the implicit to give 50% chance for Shred to deal double damage, and it's got Shred and Toxic Claws. Shred already being good because it's ranks to the skill, but Toxic Claws got a buff, so we actually get 10% damage per point when we're a werewolf. So this is actually a massive boost. For Amulet, we're going with Stormclaw's aspect. This is going to give us an additional 120% damage in a little AoE. So it's going to increase our AoE just by a little bit, but also increase our damage by quite a bit. And this is normally lightning damage, but because of our Rabid Bear aspect, this should be poison damage instead. So we don't actually get any benefit from lightning damage increases. For our first ring, we're going with Ring of Starless Skies. This has some really good affixes on it with attack speed, critical strike chance and core skills, but it's also giving us a 50% damage multiplier and resource cost reduction. And it's 5 separate 10% increases, which means that it's actually higher than 50% that we're actually getting in reality. For a second ring, we're going with Aspect of the Rabid Bear, converting all our damage into poison and giving us a big multiplier. And if you don't have the Ring of Starlit Skies, you can easily run Retaliation here instead, and it's going to give you a huge damage boost. And it'll actually be easier to hit your ultimate duration and cooldown if you use the second legendary ring. So it's actually better to have the legendary ring early until you can get everything optimized. And then for our offhand, we're going with Rampaging Werebeast. This is going to increase our ultimate duration and also give us a bunch of damage. But another thing to note on the totem here, the cooldown reduction is actually kind of important because it can free you up from having one of your ultimate duration tempers. And that ultimate duration temper can instead be Werewolf attack speed, which will be really good for you because we're not capped out on our cap 2 attack speed. If you don't understand how attack speed works, there's a cap 1 and a cap 2. Both can go up to 100%, and different things go into different places, and you can't really know them without knowing them. So I have a written portion in my written guide underneath the video. If you click on the link, go all the way to the bottom, there's an attack speed area and it breaks it down and tells you what's in each category. Now I did just hover over all of these, but if you want to see the specifics of what I recommend and not just what's on my gear, make sure you look at the stats in the written guide, because that is what I recommend, and what I have right now may not be ideal in every slot. For the seasonal gems, I'm going with the Idol from Below. That's just giving you an extra 6% main stat and extra maximum life. I'm also going with Scornful Light, which gives you 20% more damage. And then for the third one, I'm actually going to spend some time testing this over the next couple days, and I'll make sure to update the written guide. But right now I've got Elemental Brand. I need to see if the rabies that you apply automatically with the Rabid Bear is going to be enough poison to make sure that I never have to actually deal with applying poison through this. And if that's the case, I can put something else here, although there's not that much else for damage, so it'd probably be survivability. For the normal gems, we're going with Emerald on our weapon and our offhand. We do a lot of overpower in the build, but the difference between the overpower and the emeralds is not that much, and we get way more critical hits than we do overpower, so we may as well just go with these. In the armor, we're going with Sapphires, and then for the runes, we're going with Moni Cox on the first one. This is going to give us 100% more damage for a second after casting mobility skills. And then for the other one, we're going with Ahu Zan. This is a lucky hit chance to proc for us to get guaranteed critical strikes and overpowers. And this is extremely good, especially on bigger groups of enemies. It is less effective on bosses, but you still get fairly good use on bosses, especially if more of the mobs spawn with the Idol from Below, or just bosses that have additional mobs in general. For the seasonal powers, if I happen to find out that the aspect of the Rabid Bear is applying poison reliably enough, then I might end up changing this over to the Thunderous Particle, because it seems to give a little bit more damage, but it's something I'm gonna have to experiment with. But either way, for now, this applies poison. We're using Bloody Charm for the execute. We're using Fractured Core in order to break enemy damage resistance aura. And then I'm running Gleaming Conduit because we're using Celestial Surge to pull enemies together, which is very important for Shred. You'll notice a big difference when you don't have a way to pull enemies together. And so even though this only happens every 11 seconds, it does a great job in grouping up each group that you get to at least once, or even regrouping them in harder content. So the Gleaming Conduit is just going to increase the AoE of the Celestial Surge and pull more enemies in from further away. However, you could put other stuff here. If you don't have a chance to make enemies vulnerable on your gear, which you should have, you could run Sapping Crux. Or if you need more survivability, you could run Bottled Wind, but unfortunately it's only 4 seconds duration, and this is kind of a longer cooldown on Celestial Surge, so you're not going to get as much from that. Also in the early game, you can go with Shifting Powder, and that's great for movement speed. Or if you really need the Spirit, Reactive Ooze is one of the ways that you can get more Spirit into the build. For the Spirit boons, I'm going with Gift of the Stag. I like this for the gain 10 Spirit every second, because it keeps me from ever having a moment where I kind of catch and don't have Spirit to use my ability. Because don't forget that we're spending all our Spirit with our rune whenever we activate the Cox rune. But if you feel like you don't need Spirit for whatever reason, go with Wariness because it reduces enemy damage. For Eagle, I like to recommend Iron Feather and Avian Wrath. Iron Feather is a choice. If you feel like you don't need the survivability, you can definitely drop this, and you have 2 options. If you're short on attack speed, you go Swooping Attacks, or if you're short on critical strike chance, you go Scythe Talon. Between the two here, I'd rather go for Scythe Talons, because in terms of how much you get from an affix on gear, for example, this is actually superior just with the critical strike chance, I think, but then you're also getting the lucky hit chance, and that's going to play into some other stuff in the build. Under Wolf, I like to go with Energize, just so I can always keep my spirit up. You can also go with an affix on your items in order to get this as well, which would allow you to put this somewhere else. You could put it into Calamity if you need to increase your ult duration for whatever reason, or you can go with Bolster just to keep your Fortify up even more. And then for our Snake Spirit boon, It's basically only one choice, which is masochistic. But this is really good because it helps you stay alive really well. For the skill tree, we're going with 2 points into Maul. That's just going to be used for the shapeshifting and to get us to the next tree. We're going to max out our wild impulses for damage. We're maxing out Shred, and we're going to Primal Shred. We're also maxing out our Predatory Instinct for some extra crit chance, and Digitrade Gate for some extra movement speed. You should be capped out regardless, but we kind of run out of places to put points in this build, so you may as well max it. We're maxing out our Cyclone Armor for that passive damage reduction. We're maxing out Backlash, Ancestral Fortitude, and Vigilance. This is going to give more damage reduction, and some resistances. We're grabbing Blood Howl with Innate Blood Howl. This is increasing our damage by 25%, and also give us 20 Spirit, which isn't that important, but it could be something that you use early to get a little more Spirit. And either way, it just kind of ensures that you're going to be able to cast your Shred after using it regardless. We're maxing out Feral Aptitude for more damage. Now in this part of the tree, I ran out of stuff to put points into anywhere else, so I went ahead and went up here. I got Charged Atmosphere, just gives us random Lightning Bolt. Electric Shock, just in case Stormclaw actually applies to this, but I don't think it does because of our Rabid Bear aspect. And then 1 point into Bad Omen just for a little extra damage. But realistically, I don't think we're getting any value out of these. They're just kind of there. We're maxing out Envenom and Toxic Claws. These are huge damage. We're also getting some damage from Catastrophe, which we're maxing out, and Quick Shift, which we're maxing out. And then we're getting more damage reduction from Defensive Posture and Heightened Senses. Also a little more movement speed from the Heightened Senses. We're maxing out a Grizzly Rage for the armor and the cooldown reduction on the ultimate, getting both additional points. And then for our Keystone passive, really our only 2 choices is Bestial Rampage and Lupine Ferocity. Lupine Ferocity is good if you don't have critical strike chance, and you could go this direction if you wanted to lean out of getting any critical strike chance on the gear. That would give you the ability to focus more on like maximum life, and we are also getting more crits from our rune that gives us the guaranteed critical strike chances. So this is an okay choice, but I think the better choice here is to go for the 40% increased damage and the 30% attack speed, and this is a cap 2 attack speed, which is a little bit harder to max out, but this plus some tempers on our gear can allow us to get fairly close to maxing that out, which means that both our caps will be maxed. For our Paragon boards, on the first board, we're going with Keeper. Then we're going to move up from there, and we're going to grab the Spirit Glyph. This is going to be on the Heightened Malice board. Left from here, we're going with the Ancestral Guidance board, and we're going with the Fang and Claw Glyph. Left from here again, we're going to go with the Lust for Carnage board, and we're going to go with Headhunter. And then one more time, left from here, we're going with the Inner Beast board, and we're going for Dominate. And unfortunately, we ran out of boards that have useful legendaries, and this one only gives you a kind of bad bonus if you're shapeshifting, which we're not doing. So not only is it a bad legendary node, but we can't even use it. However, this board is fairly decent in terms of the rare nodes. We get a lot of resistances, max life, some attack speed, more max life, some armor if we need it, and some decent damage that actually applies to our abilities. So it's our best alternative. Now my boards here are a little bit thin. I'm not even level 250 yet on my Paragons, and I've chosen to prioritize mostly offensive. There's a lot of health that I haven't grabbed on the board yet, and I also think I'm capped out on my attack speed right now, so I'll probably reorient my gear a little bit, and once I have less attack speed, I'll go down and grab this here. For my Mercenaries, I like to go with Rahir as my hired Mercenary, and I mostly go for this for the resistances, but he also gives some nice defensive buffs, and he gives you some extra damage occasionally, so it's a pretty solid choice. For my Reinforcement, you have a couple of different options. You can go with Variana for attack speed, and I'm not actually sure if hers is cap 1 or 2, so if you guys know, make sure you leave a comment below. But either way, I'm capped out on both of my attack speeds, I believe. So instead, I opted for Aldkin, because you can get a 20% damage reduction using Field of Languish. That should be about it for the build, but if you guys have any questions, make sure you leave them in the comments below. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and let me know what you guys want to see next. I still have a few builds I personally want to hit in this season, but I'm open to trying other builds if you guys have anything in mind. And make sure you check out my previous videos because I have a lot of different builds that I've already put up. But thanks for watching, guys. I'll see you in my next video. Daddy Druid out.
Subscribe to Scream Heart. He's more than an old fart. He makes lots of fun builds. I promise his streams chill. He should probably be faster. Come watch this disaster.